So we're starting with mikol makin kasha. Nevertheless, it's a question, and I spelt out mikol makin. It does not mean from every place. It means nevertheless. In other words, that before we were saying up there on the top that it's the tzad hashava that we're going to learn from kerem and kama, which means vineyards, and standing grain, which is basically wheat or bread. Both of them, they have there's a source for both of them that they require blessings before they're eaten, and they are enjoyable. So that's the common factor between them. And so too, everything else that's enjoyable will require a blessing before them. It's called the tzad hashava, and what it is, it's a comparison from there to everything else. So we said that there's a question because the question is, we repeat it, ma la tzad hashava shebehem, just as the tzad hashava, the common factor. Tzad will translate as factor, the side of, and hashava is common. Shebehem, which is of them, in those their common factor, that the common factor was that they're enjoyable. The problem is that they have another commonality, sheken yesh bahen, that there is, yes, in them bahen tzad mizbeach, an association with the mizbeach, a factor of the mizbeach. Now that means that both of them are brought on the altar. The wine is poured on the altar, on the mizbeach, and the flour is brought on the altar together with every korban or on its own as a korban. So which means that if I'm going to use a mamatzino, just as I find here, or a tzad hashava, just as we find by these, so to everything else that's similar, I'll only be able to use the things that are totally similar with everything that's common to the what we're learning from. Now, since Karam and Kama both are on the Mizbeach, I'll only be able to learn it to things that are also on the Mizbeach. And yes, maybe I could learn the Zayas, or maybe I can't learn Zayas from there, which was this Gemara up here. But whatever the case is, I don't know everything else. And my original question was, Ashkechan Kerem Sharmina Minayan. How do I know everything else besides for the vineyard? And we were trying to learn absolutely everything. So the Gemara now says, Ella, rather, the Yalafla, we will learn it, Mishivas Aminim, from the 7 species. Now, just like the 7 species require a blessing, let's see this. Ma Shivas Haminim, just like the 7 species, Davar Shenana are things that are enjoyable. V'to'un bracha, and they require a blessing before they're eaten. Where does it say that they require a blessing? So that it says here, there's at least one way of learning it. It says v'achalta v'savata v'rachta, that you will eat, you will be satisfied, and you will bless. Es Hashem Elokecha. And normally it's understood that it's referring to Eretz Shalei b'miskenos techel balechem. It's referring to bread. And v'savata is being satisfied, refers to bread. However, there is an opinion, Rabbi Gamliel's opinion, that it's referring to the pasuk ches, which is Eretz Chita Saira. So v'achalta is either going back on pasuk tes or it's going back on pasuk ches. We're taking that opinion right now, even though that's not the halacha. We do not say that you need to bench on the 7 species. If you eat figs or dates or pomegranates, you don't have to bench, because we don't paskin like this. But in the way the Gemara is learning this out, we're using that opinion to try to learn this out. It's not going to work. What we would do if it would work, maybe we would ask, that's only according to that opinion. But regardless of that, this is something that requires a blessing. It's enjoyable and requires a blessing. So, af also. Kol davar shenana, also anything that's enjoyable, ta'un bracha, would require a blessing. Now, what we just did was we said we have a source for bracha rishona, to say a bracha, that we're required to say a bracha on everything else other than vineyards, other than wine and wheat. The source would be a mamatzinu. Let me write that down here. I'll write it up here. Ma. It's a hey. Matzinu. Just as we find. It's mamatzinu. Just as we find the 7 species require a blessing, so to everything else. The Gemara now says, 1 second, you can't learn from the mamatzino, because the mamatzino, the source of it, just as we find here, which is the 7 species, it has its own strictness. It has its own uniqueness, and therefore you can't learn from there to everything else. The Gemara asks, Ma l'shivas aminim, whereas, or just as, for the 7 species, shekain, which is chayavin, or which are obligated, bibikurim, they're obligated in bikurim, which means the first fruits. The first fruits are taken to the Kohen, taken to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Kohen. It's only referring to the 7 species. The Gemara learns that from the fact that it says Eretz by the 7 species, and then it says Eretz by Bikurim, and the Gemara learns out from that K'zeir Shava that it's referring to the 7 species. Whatever the case is, the problem is that I can't learn a rule that's by the 7 species, which is the brachas, that I need to say brachas, to anything else, because nothing else has bikurim other than 7 species. So maybe it's the bikurim factor of the 7 species that requires the bracha, but anything that doesn't have bikurim, which is everything else, does not require a bracha. That's one question. V'oid, another question is, ha'teinach, it is good, la'acharav, afterwards. But lefanav minayin, from where will I know a bracha beforehand? In other words, that v'achalta v'savata v'rachta only requires a bracha achreina. What about a bracha rishayna? We're trying to learn out the bracha rishayna. So the Gemara says, your second question is not a question. This, like kasha, this is not a question. The asi, because it comes, or that it's brought, the asi, it comes, b'kal v'chaymer, with a kal v'chaymer. The kal v'chaymer goes like this. Kishehu sava mivarech, just as when he is satisfied, or not just as, when he is satisfied he has to say a bracha. Kishehu rav, when he is hungry. Like kolshkein, is it not? Let's make an exclamation mark as well. Is it not a kal v'chaymer? Let's put in that abbreviation, and I'll put it down here. Eloi kol shekain. Is it not a kal v'chaymer? Kol shekain means is another term for a kal v'chaymer, and like kol shekain is in question form. Is it not a kal v'chaymer? Of course, it's a kal v'chaymer, and the kal v'chaymer goes like this: that just as when someone is satisfied, where he is not so excited about what he just ate, but nevertheless he has to thank God. So when before he eats, the excitement is so much more that he's about to eat. The sweet anticipation that he's about to have something good, for sure he should be required to say a bracha. Okay, so the second question was not a question. However, the first question, which was how can we learn from the 7 species, they're unique, they have bikurim. That's a real question, and that's basically leaves a dead end on this. Now we ask another question, and this question takes us back to the beginning of the Gemara. The Gemara said that there was a difference of opinion if we hold that neta revai, the fruits of the 4th year, apply to vineyards only, or if it applies to all fruits of the 4th year. And that law would be that they need to be taken to Yerushalayim. According to the one that held that it applies to all fruits, all plantings, we had an easier way of learning brachas, because it says by neta revai, it says the word hilol, which was teaching us the word that we're required to say brachas. So we're going back to that opinion now. Ulaman detani, and according to the one that taught neta revai, that it's all the plantings of the 4th year, and that's as opposed to kerem revai. So ha teinach, this is good. Kol, everything. Dibar, I have to put in the vowels here, because dibar netiya, that is eligible for planting. It means something that could be planted, called the bar netiya. It's like bar mitzvah, someone that's associated or eligible to perform the mitzvahs. But however, the lav bar netiya, something that is not eligible for planting, kagoin, for example, let's make that into a comma, basar, meat, beitzim, which is eggs, and dagim, and fish, minale, from where would he know that from? So we would only know things that are planted, because that only things that are planted would go into the category of Neter Ravai. Rather, Ella, the Gemara, this is the final conclusion, Ella Svarahu, it's logical. And the logic is, Aser Loi Liadam, it's forbidden for a man, Sheyehena, that he should have pleasure, Min Ha'ilam Hazeh, from this world, B'loi Bracha, without a blessing. Okay, so in conclusion, how do we know brachas? We know it because it's logical. We tried to do this in several steps. In several ways. We tried to learn it from Hilulim. That didn't work. We tried to learn it from Shivas Aminim, possibly was its own limud. That also didn't work. And in the end, it's just a logic.